And I started. Well, the meeting has started.
Okay. So we have a speaker view. Okay, so please put Professor Allassonnière as the speaker, and then we can start. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are joining us from around the globe. On behalf of ERA4Health, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our 10th webinar. And today we are delighted to host Stéphanie Allassonnière, who will discuss how AI and generative models are enabling improvements in medical practice and clinical research. Before we begin, a few technical notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded within approximately 1 week to the ERA4Health website and to ERA4Health's YouTube channel. To ensure the best experience for both the audience and the speaker, microphones and cameras are disabled for participants during the session. The Q&A option will be open once Professor Allassonnière concludes her presentation. We warmly encourage you to submit your questions there. We also invite you to follow our ERA4Health on LinkedIn and to stay updated on upcoming webinars, courses, and activities. And now, without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Professor Stéphanie Allassonnière.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really happy to join you for this webinar. I will share my screen. I think you all see my screen now. Okay. Tell me if there is any issue with the screen.
No, it's all good.
Okay, so today I wanted to really talk about something that is that seems to be very far away, but actually which takes place every day now, which is how artificial intelligence is really used in practice in current application. So all the examples I will provide you with are examples that are really at the bedside now, so that you won't have that false idea that AI is only coming in a few years. So AI in healthcare today, what is the setup for now? The general context is actually not coming from medical field. It really came from other natural computer vision. What I mean is that to start with, we had the chance to have many images on the web, and people were developing detection, classification, segmentation methods for real nature imaging. And this is how computer vision had a tremendous development. And the rapid development of medical imaging and all the types of things that you can do with images really came out from all this progress that would have that we were able to adapt to the medical field. And then the second dynamic came from genetics, because data were not available, of course, as much as we would like. But the question of how can we interpret those types of data, which are very high dimensional, is a crucial question in terms of mathematics. And more recently, the dynamic changes for LLMs because of the development of really accessible LLMs that you can have for your personal utility that you can adapt for the medical domain. And then, of course, all the texts that were trying to be used in the medical field, like medical records, were of interest, are of interest now. But the question is always related to how do we access to data? And we don't only need a lot of data, but in medicine, you really want to have high quality data, because of course you will never have access to all the quantity that you may have access if you are dealing with all the types of images that you can find on the web, or all the text that is generated and is put on the web. So since you don't have the quantity, you will have to rely on quality. And quality is really important, so that it means that the data has to be always close to the person that has acquired the data, so that you have this expertise coming in. And of course, in terms of quantity, the major thing that you have to think about when you are doing AI is not quantity, but rather representativity. You have to have multicentric data, and you have to represent the population you're targeting. For example, if you are dealing with breast cancer, you have to have in your study some men, because men are suffering from breast cancer. Although it is a very low percentage, they do have breast cancer. So if you want to be representative, you have to take this into account in the collection of, well, in the creation of your database. This requires structuration and coordination around these issues, and the French and European initiatives on the secondary tune of health data is really something that we have to accelerate. So the question people usually ask is it dangerous to share? I would say probably yes. But the question you have to ask yourself is it dangerous not to share your data? So basically, there is a little shift between European countries from the north and from the south. From the north, this notion of sharing is really something that is obvious. And if you go slowly in the south, and in particular in France, the notion of sharing is always, well, why should I share my own data? Why should I enter a cohort? Why should I provide these information? Well, the notion of sharing is something that is not completely homogeneous in Europe, and it's a pity, I would say. And I'm really trying to explain people that the risk of not sharing is the risk of not being with your own specificity represented in the database. So why do we do that? Well, we do that for innovation acceleration, of course, and always thinking of what is the benefit for the patient and the practitioner. And there are many different things that we can do. And of course, I will not summarize all of them, but precision medicine is really something that is at the core of many researches. Optimization of the care pathway, of course, care management and prevention are at the core of the development using AI right now. So if I focus on precision medicine, what does that particularly include? The first thing is stratifying patient, being able to really classify patient based on their characteristic that you get from all the information that you can collect at a specific time. So being able to have access to all the data, longitudinal data from a person at the time that you are facing that person is really important to gather, and so that you will be able to do a specified classification for this patient. Why do we need that? Well, if you have good cluster, very representative cluster, you will be able to find the therapeutic target based on this profile. And so what does it mean in the real effect? Well, it's really trying to anticipate diagnosis or side effect. How do we do that? We model the evolution of patient, and I will show you some example. Well, one example. We model the evolution of patient in relation to reference evolution. And then we quantify the deviation, because what does a medical doctor do? A medical doctor knows what is normal. And a pathology is usually something that is deviation from the normality. So we have to really put ourselves into this kind of way of thinking, so that we are able to mimic the way they will do, so that they will understand the methodology, the AI model that is designed here, and they will be able to accept it. So if we are able to mimic the way they're thinking, they will better accept. So other effect is proposing the best treatment at the best time for each person. So optimizing the sequence of treatment or according to the whole pathway, and optimizing the care, which can be drug or non-drug, and of course involve the caregivers. So the question now is, how do we model phenomena for example, trying to mimic what a medical doctor would do. Well, if you have access to equations that are given by the mechanic, the chemistry, or the thermodynamic, you have to take them into account. Nobody would ever contest the relevance of the gravity equation. And the gravity equation appears when you are modeling, for example, the blood flow along the body, because you have this, if the person is standing, this is really different from a person who is lying. So you have to take this into account. If you don't have access to this, you will try to use equation to mimic the reality. And these are equations that we've been able to mimic, to use to mimic the evolution of neurodegenerative diseases. As you can see, we can have very, very complex equations, but still we are able to explain everything, and I will go into the details for that example. But what I want to tell you is that these equations, although very complex, are really trying to mimic the understanding of the evolution of a neurodegenerative diseases that would be the interpretation of a neurologist. Now imagine you have something even more complex. Well, you will have to use implicit equation. So mathematically speaking, these are still equations that we are actually understanding, but regarding what happens to the, let's say, common user, these are called the black box. These are the neural network. Why is it implicit equation? Because for a mathematician, you have your input, and each node of the neural network, each neuron here, is really doing a very simple equation. So each little ball here in each layer is a simple, very simple equation. What makes everything very complex is that you are actually concatenating all these very simple equations in a very long row of layers. And so at the end of the day, the equation becomes very complex. But you cannot write it. It's really implicit. We know that there is an equation that takes in input and gives in an output, but you cannot write it simply. But still, you still have equation in there, so that you somehow understand what locally is being done. Okay, so I want to provide you with two examples as bench to market cases that are combining AI and translational research. So the two examples I will provide you came from research from academic labs and were translated to market. The first one is digital twin for diagnostic and anticipation, optimization of patient pathway, and optimization of clinical trial recruitment. And the second one is optimization of trajectory, how to better run sonographic exam for rare disease diagnosis for fetuses. So let's go for the first example. The first example is actually based on a very famous notion now, which is digital twin. What is a digital twin? A digital twin is something that would appear, sorry, I hope you can see my arrow moving. So imagine you have Anna. Anna is going to the medical doctor because she's suffering from something. After a clinical interview with the medical doctor, she goes to get new analysis, could be medical imaging, it could be biology, etc. Then she comes back to the medical doctor, who gives her a therapy so that Anna is taking the drug or whatever. And then if Anna is fine, then everything stops. But sometimes, and I would say most of the time, Anna will have to go back to the medical doctor because there are side effects, because this is not the right dose, because this doesn't work, and go again in that left-hand side loop. Where the digital twin is really interesting is as soon as I have all the information from Anna, both coming from the interview, the medical interview, and from all the data that I can collect, I can create the digital twin of Anna. On that digital twin, I will be able to test multiple possible therapy and get the outcome, which will be the representation and impact all the side effects of each of these therapy on the digital twin, so that I will be able to select the best one, go back to Anna electronic health record and probably Anna's medical doctors to verify that this is patient friendly with Anna. There's nothing that I don't have in my information at the beginning that would probably help choosing the correct drug. For example, if Anna is working by night, this is different treatment probably, and this is something that does not appear necessarily here, but that the medical doctor can say, well, Anna is working by night, so the treatment that is proposed is not patient-friendly for Anna, I have to change it. And then update the digital twin as well, so that at the end of the day, I will be able, well, he or she, the doctor, will be able to give the correct therapy to Anna, knowing everything and having tried on the digital twin all the possibilities. So this is, of course, something that we would like to reach. This is our quite far goal, I would say, but still, there are examples that do already exist. And the first one, which is not a digital twin, but a paper twin, is how do you predict the size of your kids given these curves that you have well, in France at least, you have that in the health book when the kid is born. So imagine you have Anna. Anna is a little girl, she's 5 and she's 110 centimeters. And then Anna at 7 comes back with 120, which is fine. And then suddenly Anna comes at 8, but she's still 120. And there is something that is not normal. We do know that Anna should have followed roughly this green curve, but unfortunately at the age of 8, Anna has changed, has deviated from her theoretical trajectory. And this is how pediatricians use this curve. This is not just to know how big will be your kid or when this will happen that your kid will be taller than yourself, but this is really something that the pediatrician use to understand if there is a change in growth dynamic. And how do they extrapolate what's going to happen theoretically and see if what's in reality happen is correct or is in adequation with the theory. And this is how we do want to do exactly what we want to do for other types of data and other types of diseases. So just keep this in mind. The green curve is the middle curve, and you have all the possible deviation because you have taller kids and smaller kids, and there is a difference between boys and girls. Now, what we've been able to do, we are not yet capable of creating the whole body digital twin, but we've been able to mimic the evolution of neurodegenerative diseases with very different types of data. We have been using scores, cognitive scores, to measure memory, concentration, practice, and what else? And language. And we have been also using different types of medical images, anatomical one, so that we are able to get the atrophy of the cortex, the atrophy of the hippocampi, and we also used functional MRI. And how do we do that? Each patient, like for Anna, comes with several measurements, right? Some are quite early at age, well, let's say age 60. Some are coming quite late at the age of 80, and we don't have the same pace of image, right? Image acquisition. What we do is to reconfigure the data to find if there are girls and boys, for example, okay, so they don't have the same dynamic. And for all these two groups, estimating what was the green curve earlier and all the variation that can occur in the two populations. So we are reordering the data, we are reconfiguring the data, and we are taking one thing into account is that for age in growth, we don't have any issue. Age is the age. It comes, if the person is growing from age 0 to age 20, the age is really meaning something. If you go to neurodegenerative diseases, the age is actually not meaning anything, because for that person, for example, this person actually may not be completely relevant. Well, the brain age of that person is not the age the same as that person. It may actually go a little later because that person has actually a brain that is in a better shape from the beginning. Okay. And so we are taking the age as something that is random and is actually linked to the diseases rather than to the state, well, the real age of the person. I don't know if this is completely clear, but think of that. Neurodegenerative diseases, we don't have the starting point, so the age of a person does not mean anything. So we have to take this into account, right? We cannot say if you are 72 and you will be that state. 72 for a person who has started an Alzheimer's disease probably 15 years ago, it's different from someone who is starting the disease right now. Right. So, as I said, where are we for digital twin? Medical imaging, we were able to model the evolution of patients, so really a temporal evolution for heterogeneous population, so girls and boys, well, I would say girls and boys, you know, but severe versus mild Alzheimer's disease, you don't know from the beginning. So the population has no label from the beginning. In terms of genomic, we're still not able to have a complete digital twin, but we are able to classify, for example, tumor, so that we are targeting a better response to treatment with a specific drug. And we are trying to include in our model both clinical data and real world data, of course, coming from all the devices that you can wear, which could be non-medical devices like your watch or whatever, rings and so on and so forth, but it could be also pacemaker that is implanted. But all these data are really not of the same order of difficulty. It's acquired at a different pace. It could be very often, it could be very noisy as well. You can have missing data because for some reason the watch did not send the information. You were in, I don't know, in a place where there was no internet, etc., etc. So the technical challenges are of a very higher order. And in the future, how do we will use it? Well, exactly as I showed you for Anna, we will use it for personalizing medicine, optimizing stratification, and proposing a therapeutical target to the right patient at the right time. We will be able, oh, this is French. We will be able to do the longitudinal follow-up and anticipating diagnosis for some patient, anticipating the optimal therapeutic window, evaluating treatment as well. Imagine you have some patient that should follow a specific trajectory and you give a treatment at some time. The deviation can measure you can measure the difference between the theoretical evolution and what happens since you provided the treatment, and this will measure the effectiveness of treatment. And you can also anticipate resistance. And if you put this together, this means that we will be able to have a better inclusion and evaluation of treatment for clinical trials. And at the end of the day, which would be probably something that I don't know if I will see it by myself, but we can think about clinical trials where the placebo arm will be exactly the digital twins of all the patients that are treated in the treated arm. And of course, you will be your own placebo if you come into a clinical trial. Well, your digital twin will be the equivalent placebo. Okay, so concrete example of how we do it, how we did it, and how we translate it to patient and clinical trial providers. So as I said, we were able to design the evolution between 60 and 80 of the cortical atrophy, hippocampus atrophy, evolution of cognitive scores, and the glucose consumption in the brain, so that we have these, remember my green curve for Anna, we have the median scenario that would appear in a population that has here, for example, Alzheimer's disease. How we use it concretely. So these are the curve for the clinical scores. So for example, Anna comes to see her general practitioner. She goes through a memory test, and the memory test provide the medical doctor with memory score, language score, practice score, and concentration score. These 4 curves that you can see are the ones that are reflecting the mean trajectory. So for the growth curve for girls, it was the green curve, but I have 4 scores, so I have 4 curves. Okay, it is not just only 1, but 4. With this, sorry, I'm trying to remove the picture. Okay, anyway, so Anna comes, and this is Hannah's score. Okay, so I have 4 score for Anna, and exactly as a pediatrician would do, I will draw the curve for Anna. So as you can see, these are the average curve, and these are the specific curves for Anna. These are the, well, this is the digital twin of Anna. Okay, so this is Anna, and this is how Anna should evolve in theory. With this, we are able to say that most probably Anna will be diagnosed with an Alzheimer's disease before 80. Unfortunately for Anna, she had to come 5 times, and the diagnosis came, she was 80, although we have predicted it 3 years earlier. This system is actually has been tested in retrospective cohorts, and we are able to predict Alzheimer's disease with a 4-year period in advance. And we are able to predict Parkinson's disease with 2 years in advance. And the last one is Huntington, and it's 3 years in advance. What does it mean? Well, it means that for Parkinson or Huntington, if there are drugs that you can provide to the patient, you can anticipate the drug treatment. And what does it mean? It means that the person will have access to the treatment much earlier. And if it's much earlier, you can expect the benefit to be a little better because you did not wait until the person get really worse. For Alzheimer's disease, well, unfortunately in France, we do not have reimbursed drugs, but other countries do have. And so there are 2 options. The first one is, can we give a drug to Anna from the very beginning? And if we can, so we will be able to see if Anna deviates from these curves. You see that at the end, the initial curves that we predict are quite close to the end curve. And so you will be able to see if the drug has an effect. And if Anna is not cannot be treated as in France, you can probably include Anna in a clinical trial if Anna is a good candidate. How do we do that? Imagine the clinical trial is has as outcome the language. Okay, so measurement of language capacity. If this is the outcome of the clinical trial, you can see that here Anna is in a very, very stationary period of her disease, because in theory Anna will not evolve these in the 12 months of a clinical trial. If you don't see Anna Anna's disease evolving, you will never see an effect of the drug, okay? So no effect of disease, no effect of drug visible. So Anna is not a good candidate if the outcome is language. If the outcome is concentration, here Anna is in a very active period of her disease. So if you give her some drug, then you will probably have an outcome that will be the effect of the drug on Anna's behavior. So this is how we do, and how do we do exactly? We are trying to re-engineering clinical trial, first by running more efficient clinical trials. So we accelerate the recruitment by adding, by optimizing the patients that are sent is not the correct word, referred to a clinical trial recruitment site. We run more powerful trial because with this digital twin, we increase the statistical power of each clinical trial, weighting the persons that were actually recruited before by their relevance towards the outcome with the digital twin, and of course facilitate the market access. So it's really trying to connect patients with the clinic for patient to have a better treatment. So if you Google Doc Memo the French website is La Clinique du Docteur Memo, but the international website is docmemo.com. You will see that it's used both for recruitment, it's used for increasing the power of clinical trials with some pharma companies. And so this is not something that stayed in the labs, but really went to help clinicians better enroll patients in clinical trials and help developing new drugs and targeting persons that are relevant for specific drugs. Okay, you may not have noticed this before, but these models are actually generative models. So we are also able to provide new data that are completely virtual. And so if you go to the website that is here, so that is digitalbrain.org, you will have access to simulation of virtual cohort at large scale. You can have access to 1 million of subjects with more than 5 million visits that you can download for cognitive assessment, for cortical thickness, to shape of left and right hippocampi, and the glucose metabolisms as well. So you have access to fake data, I would say, that are actually mimicking what you have in real life, and that you can use for research, completely open research. Okay, so I took back this slide because the question that remains is, how does regulation help us or not? Well, for personalized medicine, as soon as you provide something and do a clinical trial afterwards, so any AI medical device using AI that does a clinical trial, there's no problem. If you do a RCT, a regular RCT, then you are fine. The regulation is only looking at the RCT, and if the result of the randomized clinical trial is positive, then that's okay. To use this to anticipate patients and to patient diagnosis and therapeutic windows or treatment evaluation, this is still not yet something that we've been able to do. Why? Because to do a real clinical trial, a prospective clinical trial for prevention, it would require basically a clinical trial that has a 4-year length. And if you think about this, this is really difficult because it's costly and no one has the money to do that. So we are still trying to find a way to convince the regulator that retrospective clinical trials are sufficient, but this is not yet done. And of course, the better inclusion evaluation of treatment is quite the same if we are able to, well, to convince for the first, we will be able to convince for the second. But what is still a dream, I would say, is how we can use one patient, a digital twin, as a placebo person in the control arm. There's nothing that we can say about this for now for the regulator. Using retrospective data, they're okay. Using generated data, they start to think about it. But using a full cohort given by digital twins is something that they did not discuss yet. But this is still a dream we're trying to reach. Okay, second example, optimization of trajectory. What does it mean and how did we develop this? What is an optimization of a trajectory? Well, optimization of a trajectory is actually like a decision tree. You start with the first feature, and if the first feature is present, you go yes. If it's not, you go no. And then you ask the second question, if the feature is feature 2 present or not. And the outcome should be the interest score for other signs to look at. So if I said feature 1 is present, what is the best feature 2 I have to look at so that at the end, I will not have many questions to ask. I don't know if you have tried this, but this is in the most general case, this is the 20 question example. So in average, if you think about something in 20 questions, I should be able to know exactly what you were thinking of. And this is this type of thing, but we are not trying to reach 20. We really want to go much lower than that. Why? Because we are focusing on a specific use case, which is when you have a pregnant woman coming at 3 months, the sonographer is doing the exam. And if there is something, then there might be other exams and so on and so forth to try to have a relevant diagnosis before the birth. The question we have was, can we do that decision tree for rare diseases, and the phenotypes we can have access are given by the sonographic phenotypes. So something that you can see on the sonographic exam. So nothing related to genetics, for example. So that was the question from obstetrician, and the lack of data on phenotypes or co-occurrence were really difficult, because if you know exactly that one disease has, let's say 70%, well, 7% prevalence, then given that disease, you know that a specific number of co-occurrence of phenotypes has probability, let's say 50%, then you can do the calculation and you can go down the tree. Unfortunately, we do not have access to this. The only thing we have access is most of the time the prevalence of the disease. Sometimes the exhaustive list of phenotypes that can occur given this disease. Sometimes as well, the prevalence of these phenotypes given the disease. For example, if you have a Chance syndrome, the probability of having tetralogy of Fallot is about 95%, something like this. Well, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just a mathematician. So if I say something medically wrong, don't feel upset. I'm just a mathematician. I'm the one doing math. I'm not doing the medicine, fortunately. So we have access to only one probability. So given the Chance syndrome, I have access to the probability of Fallot's tetralogy. However, I do not have access to the probability of having Fallot's tetralogy plus something else, 6 finger on the left foot. Okay, so we know exactly that rare diseases are actually not just given by a specific phenotype, but the co-occurrence of phenotypes. And this is where everything becomes very difficult, because we have an exorbitant problem size, so 3, because I don't know for yes, no, or I cannot get access to that. I can have access to this information, because the baby is moving, because the sonographic exam is difficult to get, or something like this. So I have 3 possibilities, yes, no, or I don't know, to the power the number of anomaly, which is larger than 500. We are more about 1,000. This is more than the number of particles in the universe. So we have to learn what we call the rules of the environment. So we have to learn, if I have that phenotype 1 plus phenotype 2, what is the probability of having disease A? And we have to dialogue between the question I have to ask to this environment. So do I have to go to see feature 2, then 3, then 4, then 5? Or should I go to feature 2 and then 5 and then 7, whatever the order should be? And this is by question, we have to design the tree, we have to question the environment and go back to see what is the most likely. And this is called reinforcement learning. This is how it looks like. So the agent is the person who decides to do something. And as the agent has an information of the current state, he or she takes a decision, an action. The action impacts the environment. There are some rewards, which could say this is a good or a bad decision. The reward is calculated and the state changes with respect to this action. Of course, if you want to design a decision tree that should be the smallest possible, the action is a sequence of features that you will have to consider. So how did we do that? Well, we did the math, and it was a PhD from Rémi Besson. And at the end of his PhD, he was actually able to do an online algorithm which was working for the 80 most frequent rare diseases. And so we decided to go further and create Sonio, which was a startup. So the goal of Sonio is really assisting the sonographer in real time, and I want to emphasize this, is real time during this ultrasound exam to ensure optimal phenotyping. So if you have a routine person, obstetrician or gynecologist alone, these person usually know up to 10 diagnoses with all the phenotypes that can occur. If you have an expert, it may go to 30. If you use Sonio, then you will have access to more than 400 diseases and diagnoses. How does it work? There is an interface, so I show you the interface, the initial interface, but I would rather show you what, well, how it works. So this is not the final interface we had. So the medical examination starts with this. Up. I will try to accelerate. So you have access, well, each person has access to his or her preferences in terms of language, in terms of routine, etc. When this has been, you can start the examination. The first thing that you have to say is what is the trimester, the sex if it's no, the age of the mom, and if there are already some CGH array that has been collected, and if you have also the nuchal translucid. Then up, you start with the initial sign. So you have a first sign that is abnormal, and you start with this. Here, it's coarctation of aorta. When you have this, the first thing Sonio says is go to the heart and see if these 3 ones are normal or no. You see that you have the maybe here. For that person, nothing happened. Then you still keep the heart, but you have seen everything and you can say that everything is okay in the heart. Then Sonio said, kidney is important. Go and see what happens to the kidney. Again, kidney, you have seen everything, you can move forward. And the next one, it will be general aspect of the fetus. single umbilical artery or moderate, etc., etc. So these are technical elements that I do not pronounce correctly. Then if this general part is correct, go to the skull. You see that this is not from the head to the foot. It's really something that is targeting what is a priority in the exam, given what you've said earlier. So it's really dynamic. Again, everything is fine. Everything is fine for the face. Go to the arm. And here you have the summary. With this, which is just a coarctation of aorta, it seems to be an isolated anomaly, which means that the baby can be treated either in utero or just when it comes to birth. Imagine, well, and then you have the reliability. Okay, you see that, so you believe the result is reliable. Now, imagine for some reason there is something that you really think you missed. You can go back, and instead of horseshoe kidney saying no, well, you're not so sure. The horseshoe kidney is maybe, or is the kidney may have a horseshoe shape. So you say yes. And what turns out is that there may be some other syndromes that pops up. And Sonia suggests you to proceed the examination further because the information are missing. Okay, so you will still have a way to change and then update. Okay, so I have here a second example where the initial element is something else. Oops. It's the tetralogy of Fallot, which I was talking about. And then again, heart, face. And then you, on the face, you see something very, so you don't have to go all through the faces elements. If you see something, so for example, here, a polyhydramnios, you can write it. You don't have to wait until the list proposes it to you. And then it changes to the here's, etc., etc., etc. And then if you go at the end, you will have here that for 90%, and the result is thought reliable, it is a vector syndrome, right? So what did we use it for? Well, it's for person to be addressed to the correct center where the baby can be taken care with the correct persons. For example, if there is something to do in utero, or if the medical doctor has to propose an interruption of the pregnancy. But actually, we are most of the time using it to reassure parents. There is something that is a little deviation of normality. Your baby may not be that tall because we have seen a very small femur. Well, that's not a big deal. The parents are not tall either. So this is not something that is abnormal. This is something that is in the normality of the population. So really to reassure parents. And this is something that is really important. Okay. Thank you. I'm done. So what I wanted to show you is really concrete examples that are not only in the labs, but going to help clinicians and we hope help patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for an excellent talk. It was very interesting. We are open for questions now. Do you want to read the questions out of the Q&A?
Can I have when I click on Q&R, I cannot see anything. Oh yeah. No. No, I cannot see the questions. I don't know why, but if I click on the Q&R, I can show you. Actually, I can still show you, share my screen. I don't have access to the question. Whoa.
I don't think there are questions right now because I don't see either.
Oh, so on the Q&R, you cannot see questions? This is what I see. Can you see it as well?
Yes, I am.
Well, okay. So I don't see.
So no question
myself.
from the audience. I just want to add that we will send all the website and the links that you mentioned with the email that participants were registering with. Well, I can see a red dot with the Q&A, but I don't see any Q&A. Oh, okay. Maria just opened the Q&A, so there should be a question from Marta Rigoni. Do you think regulators and policymakers are ready to change guidelines, access, and reimbursement? In Italy, the essential levels of care, or LEA, based on evidence provided by AI? Or do you think clinicians are ready to design and conduct RCTs incorporating these technologies?
Good question. So for policymakers and regulators, we are actually in a very intense period of discussion. We are trying to provide them with examples where it is necessary. For example, when you have in the US, for example, I think you have more than 5 clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease for now. If you think of each of them has to recruit 300 person each arm, plus the fact that one person can only be included in a single clinical trial, then of course there is a burden. If you don't recruit the good person for your own clinical trial, well, that person will not be relevant for you, but this person may have been relevant for another clinical trial. So trying to really optimize clinical recruitment, etc., is something that we are trying to, well, to push so that at the end of the day, the clinical trial will be better for everybody, not only for the provider, but for the patient, that will be oriented towards the better clinical trial for him or herself. And so we are really discussing, also to use digital twins, and we are discussing to use synthetic data in control arms, because when you have rare diseases, for example, where it's difficult to recruit, let's say 100 person each arm, if you say that I will have 100% in the treated arm, but just 25% in the control arm, that I will use generative AI to augment the population, that at the end of the day, you don't have 200 people to recruit, but just 120 or 25, which is less, and it's less, of course, money, but it's less risk for the clinical trial itself, because a clinical trial that is not able to recruit enough is just ending. So this is something that we are discussing with the policymaker and the regulator at DA, EMA, and in France as well, HAS, concerning the practitioners themselves. Well, they are quite eager to use that. Actually, Sonia, it's the practitioners that came with that question. So they want to use it. They know that they will benefit for it. The only question they have is, can it be something that I can trust? And this is where you have to provide. It's like driving a car. When you drive a car, you are actually not knowing all the mechanics of the engine, but you have been trained to use the car correctly, in a good fashion, not to use it to kill people, to use it to drive you from one point to the other, and you know the rules, and you know if there's something that happens on the board, you know where to look in the book, and if you don't see the answer, you know who to contact, the garage. And this is exactly what medical doctors want. They want a tool with a training which does not make them become a data scientist. They don't have to. You're not an engine expert when you drive your car, but you know how to drive it. And the exactly same thing. You have to know how to drive it. And they have to know where to look at if there is something that pops, or if they disagree with the decision. So some kind of a book where they can find some answers. And if they do not find the answer, who to contact. This is exactly the same thing. And they have to have their own judgment free still. This is the only thing. So it's just an advice. This is not an order.
Great. Thank you for that. Another question is how digital twins are easy to get approved by the EMA and the ethics?
It depends where you are using it. For example, digital twins are already used before surgery to mimic the surgery. For example, if you have a heart defect, where to place the pacemaker so that the electric signal will be sent at the correct place so that the heart will have a good contraction if there is an issue, is something that you do on the digital twin of the heart. So you have all the equations for that. You know what are the equations for contraction. Contraction is just un ressort. How do you say? Un ressort in English. I don't know how to say that. But contraction of a fiber, we know exactly what it is. What are the equations? We know the how does the electric signal goes through these fibers, etc. So these are the first case where you have access to all the equation. So you can have the shape with the MRI, for example, and then you put everything in like this. And then you put the heart defect, and then you place at different area your pacemaker, and you see what is the effect at the end of the day. So before surgery, for the example, for that types of surgery, many people are using now digital twins. If you want to use digital twin, as I said, for the placebo arm in a clinical trial, this is not allowed yet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question. Do you have additional resources you recommend for looking into understanding these clinical decision systems, especially for better understanding which weights are the most significant for addressing first before the other ones to gain the most information?
Oh, I don't think I understood the whole question. Do I have access to the question? Oh, yes, I think so. Do you have additional resources, Ukraine, for looking into understanding this clinical decision system? You have many webinars or probably videos that you can find explaining. For example, we have done many things on DocMemo. The CEO of DocMemo was a former researcher, and he did many presentation of everything. And you have journal papers and conference papers also, peer-reviewed conference papers. What I would say is that it really depends on what is the tool you want to understand. You cannot understand all of them at the same time, because some are using, as I said, mechanical digital twin. Other are using mimicking, like we did, mimicking with equation. Other types are using deep learning or reinforcement learning. Everything is different. So you cannot have access to all the understanding, except if you're a mathematician and you want to do statistics, and then you have access to all of this. But you're not a medical doctor. You are you are a mathematician. But otherwise, if you have a clinical decision system that you are thinking could be of interest for you, then you have to look at the paper. Do you have access to journal or conference paper that are peer reviewed by pairs that says that the technique, the methodology is relevant for the experts? Okay, so if you have an AI system, it has to be published in AI conferences or journals. If it's only published in medical journals, be careful, because in medical journals, you have medical reviewers, and medical reviewers may not have understood the whole thing and not facing the critical use cases that may be very, very dangerous. So I would go for the references and the scientific references of these decision system. And after that, you can trust it. If there are very strong resources peer-reviewed resources in non-medical journal, really mathematical, statistical journals, then you can trust that.
That's a very good advice. Before we go on to the last question, I want to mention that our next webinar will include a panel discussion dedicated to federated data and collaborative health research infrastructures. In light of your very interesting phrase that you said, it's very dangerous not to share the data. So thank you for that. And the last question would be, in Sonio, I noticed that there was a statement that Sonio thinks the results are reliable. I wanted to ask about the significance of this. Is this about taking responsibility?
No, it's because in Sonio, we have only 500 of the most frequent rare diseases, although I think there are 7,000 of them, and I would say 1/10 of them could be diagnosed using sonographic exam. So we only have 500 among the 700. Which said, why did we say we think the results are reliable? Is that because we have for our database of 500, we say that 99% is, I don't know, Vector. However, it could be something that we haven't seen in the 200 left, okay? And for some reason, the 200 left are probably the most difficult because we don't have access to many, we don't have access to much information on those pathology. So it's both in terms of responsibility, but also saying that we have started with a database that is not completely exhaustive. So regardless of that, we say 99%, but only regardless of that.
Okay. So thank you very much. We are 2 minutes after time, but it was so interesting. So thank you again. And the recording will be uploaded to the ERA4Health website. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.